Let's try this one more time. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk to you guys about becoming a social worker. If you guys are not aware, becoming a social worker was actually my first career after graduating from college. And I did graduate college as a non-traditional student. And so when I decided to go back to school, I had to figure out what I wanted to do. I remember meeting Miss Dolores Williams. I can't remember how I met her, but I did, and I ended up scheduling an opportunity to speak with her and be advised by her. So this had to be in the year 2000. So I became a social worker like years ago, and recent years at that. So let me just be clear. So when I decided to meet with her, I didn't know if I wanted to pursue nursing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I always went back to my high school teacher. Her name was Miss Bridges. And so there was two Miss Bridgeses in my high school, and I have to mention both of them. So one Miss Bridges was actually my science teacher. And across the hallway was the special education class. And I always went to that class, checked on the students before coming to her class. And I knew at that point when I was in high school, I wanted to pursue a degree in special education and deaf ed. So when I actually started college, that was my major. I was a double major. And I'll get to that point as well too. And I always remembered her saying, because I was always saying, is there something we can do? Can we get this? And there was, books and papers. I was always like leveraging resources for those students. And even during recess time, you would see me in the classroom with those students. So I always thought I was going to be a special education teacher, and I love sign language. So I thought about, hey, I'm going to be a special education teacher, but I'm also going to know sign language so that I can also communicate with the hearing impaired students in my classroom. And so, but she was always saying, I think you're going to make a great social worker. And at that time, I didn't really know what a social worker really was or what they could do. When I thought about social work, I always thought about child protective services. I thought about, people taking people's kids and putting them in foster care. That's what I knew about social work. So I actually never really explored what social workers can do and what choices they had as far as a career. So when I started college, again, my major was special ed and deaf ed. And so I was a double major. At the time that I was in college, then I was married. I had my daughter Amber. She had, of course, Down syndrome. And so I decided I did not want to do special ed and deaf ed because I did not want my entire life to be consumed with disabilities. I wanted to focus on raising my daughter and getting the resources that she needed to be as independent as possible once she became an adult. And so I stayed away from college for, I say a few years. I actually came back, I say 4 years, and then came back in 1997. And I changed my major to interior design. I have no idea why. I do know that I love decorating, but also it was not the career that I wanted. So after a couple of semesters, I decided, I'm not going to do that. So I had to figure out what I was going to do. And so I took another 3 years off from school, and I met this lady by the name of Miss Dolores Williams. And when I met her, I did not know she was a social worker. And I was talking to someone about going back to school and what my interests were. And so someone said, hey, you need to talk to Miss Dolores Williams. She's on the university's campus. We're here where I work. Schedule some time and go meet with her. And I was like, I know that name. But I had met her at a community event. And so I scheduled some time to go and talk with her. And when I did, I was so enamored about social workers. I was in love with the thought of becoming a social worker, because in that meeting, I think we may have talked for like 2-3 hours. She may not even remember this, and she has a great memory. But I remember sitting there thinking, every 5 years I'm going to have a new job as a social worker, because there's so many things that we can do. We can also work for Child Protective Services, and Child Protective Services have so many elements to it. So you can work in foster care, you can work in adoption, you can work in vulnerable adult, you can supervise, you can do training. Like, no one had ever explained that to me. And though I never chose the path to go work for Child Protective Services, I was a foster parent for 20 years. And so I encountered many social workers on the foster care side and also on the adoption side as well, and supervisors. And went to a lot of trainings that they hosted. And as a matter of fact, I actually ended up doing some trainings for Child Protective Services. So going back to speaking with her, I kept saying, oh my gosh, I am going to have a social work job like every 5 years. I'm going to be just changing jobs like crazy, because I'm just so in love with becoming a social worker. And so I did my application, I did my pre-social work courses at that time, did my interview, I did my service learning hours with Family First under, oh my gosh, I can't even think of the lady's name. And then Mr. I see his face. There's two people. One was a social worker and one was not a social worker, but it was on the Families First. And so I did my hours with them, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. I'm doing parent trainings. I was like, I cannot wait to become a social worker. And so got into the social work program, and it was time for me to do my internship. And I had no idea where I was going to do my internship. So between Miss Dolores and Miss Susan, Dr. Rosowski now, and she says, hey, there's this department on campus. I think you would be great as a intern student there, so forth and so on. I was like, okay, great. So they told me about the department. It was called, or is called, the Institute for Disability Studies. And so I met with Margie Cox. She was a social worker. Matter of fact, she's a clinical social worker. She does counseling today. She did my supervision hours for my clinical license. So I went and I met with her. She immediately said, yes, you can come over. And this was the first time that they ever took an undergraduate as an intern student. They always took a graduate student in this department because it was a macro level. But because I was a non-traditional student, I was a parent of a child with a disability, she found that I was just a great fit to the department. And I was just like, okay. I said I did not want to be around disabilities 24 hours. That's why I did not finish in special ed and deb ed. So my first day with her, I was like, okay, how am I going to tell her that this is not going to be a good fit? Because I'm thinking disability studies. And then once she broke it down what they did programming from 0 to aging. I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to be around disabilities 24/7. I don't want to work it and then come home to it. Like, I felt like I needed a break in my day from it. So my second day, I was working with Margie Cox, and we were working with a family. This mom was at her wit's end, and she had to make a decision to put her child in an Ellisville State School, which is a mental health facility, which was a live on campus facility for her daughter, who had a diagnosis, but her daughter also had some oppositional defiant behaviors, where she would wake up in the middle of the night and her daughter would be standing over her, just wanting to harm herself. And so this mom struggled with putting her daughter into an in-living facility. And I did not understand that, because here I am, I have this beautiful daughter, and I know that individuals with intellectual disabilities live on this campus, and I just could not phantom the thought of putting my daughter away somewhere. That's how I saw that. I did not see that as a relief. I didn't see it as a respite. I saw it as this mom did not care. And so once I started talking with the mom and hearing her story, we went to Ellisville State School, and that day we got her daughter admitted. And I say we were there. And I remember sitting in the back seat of that car, and I was like, I'm struggling with this. How am I going to tell Margie that this is my last day? Like, I cannot do this. Like, that was the most heart-wrenching day. And I think I was on day 2, day 3. Like, I'm getting experience hands-on early on, like the very first day. Like, that was my orientation. And so we got back to the office, and it was late that day because we had to take the mom home. We actually ended up leaving the daughter there. And we got back to the office, and I was like, how am I going to tell her? How am I going to tell her? I was sitting in her office, and she turns to me and she says, you know, she said, had it not been for you being there today to support that mother, she was like, it would have been a really bad day. She said the way that you comforted the mother, the way you touched her, like I didn't embrace her, but I would like touch her hand, or I put my hand on her shoulder, and just listen to the mother. She says, you leveraged a good atmosphere. She said that entire meeting could have gotten out of hand had you not been there. And now the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I can't do this, I can't do this. And I'm hearing my social work supervisor, who I'm doing my internship with, telling me how great of a job I did that day. So I didn't tell her I wasn't coming back the next day. I came back the next day, and she says, hey, come on in. She said, we haven't really had a chance to talk about what you want to do with social work. What you want to do with social work. And I sat there in her office, and I said, you know, when I spoke to Miss Dolores Williams, I told her that I was going to have a social work job every 5 years, because there was just so many interests that I had in becoming a social worker. And she says, so what do you want to do? And I told her, I said, I want to be a medical social worker. And she said, hey, I can set that up for you. I could set you up. You can go to the local hospital. She said 1 day a week, and you can spend the entire day over there as part of your internship here, so that you can get exposure. And she says, so what other areas? And I said, you know, some case management. She said, oh, you're going to get that here. She said, matter of fact, what we've done in the last couple of days, that was case management. I was like, oh, really? And I said, I want to do some education. And she says, oh, you're going to get that here. So what else do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to write grants. And she said, oh, you're in the right place. And I was like, what? I'm going to get all that here. And she made it happen. Margie Cox made it happen. I spent an entire semester with the best experience, with the best supervisor, working with some amazing social workers. We did grant writing, we did programming, we did community events, we did conferences, we did workshops. I went to Forest General Hospital every Monday, and I then realized that I did not want to be in a hospital. I'm grateful for the experience, but I did not want to be in a hospital. I didn't like the setting. I didn't like going into a place and not being able to come out when I left. Like, I got, a 30-minute break. I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that every time that I went, I saw a different patient. I wanted to see my patients and my clients progress. So I knew that hospital social work was not for me. And so when it came for me to end my internship there, I went to Margie and I said, I think I'm at the point where I want to move away. I just felt in my spirit that I just wanted to move. I wanted to give my daughter some more opportunities. Being in that department, I saw where other states were very progressive in disability research, disability resources, independent living. They were rich in resources, and I wanted Amber to have that opportunity. So Amber and I went on, after I graduated, Margie gave me this amazing graduation party at her house. It was a surprise, and I walked in. I didn't know it was for me. I thought it was like a meeting, a social work staff meeting, but it was me. There was pink and green balloons there. It was like so funny. I was like, oh, this is for me. Okay, let me go back out and come back in, you know. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's for me. But after that, a week after I graduated, I took my license, my licensure exam, passed it, of course. And I said, you know what, I'm going to spend the next month, and Amber and I are going to do a road trip, and we're just going to go to different states, and we're going to see what's out there. So I went through Alabama, went through Georgia, went through North Carolina, went to Tennessee, went to Virginia, and then I ended up going back to North Carolina. Met someone who worked for North Carolina Down Syndrome Society, and they were connecting, but they were given a lot of resources if we moved there, some of the schools and so forth. I applied to a couple of jobs there, and one of the jobs called Margie and said, hey, you know, we're calling to get a reference on, you know, Terry Smith. She listed you as her supervisor. And at that point, Margie was like, nope, I'm not giving her a reference. And they were asking her why. She was like, because I want to hire her. She wanted to hire me. And the way she tells the story is that she hung up the phone and she went to the director for IDS, the Institute for Disability Studies, and said, we're hiring her today. So what salary can we offer her? And so it was so funny because now this is kind of towards the end of June. And Margie calls me like the next day, because I think it took her some time to get Dr. Siders, Jane, on board to hire me. And she was like, we need her. She's done this. She's created these programs. She's good. She's facilitated the support groups, blah, 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 blah. Like, she was just selling me. And so, and finally Dr. Siders gave in and said, we'll hire her, but this is what her salary is going to be. And I went back and forth because the salary was lower than what I was making in corporate America. Mind you, I still had my job at the bank. So when I left my internship, I would actually leave campus and go to my job, and I would work on Saturdays and Sundays to get all of my hours in. Because I loved my job. And I struggled with that, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I said, well, you know what? I can keep my job at the bank part-time and still do this full-time. So, and then I was like, do I really want to stay here? And then I thought about the opportunities. I had applied for a graduate school in social work at Jackson State University. And I was like, you know, I've already been accepted to graduate school X, Y, and Z. So anyway, so I ended up taking the job here on campus at the Institute for Disability Studies. I went ahead and did one semester of graduate school in social work at Jackson State University, but then working here, I was able to go to school without paying any tuition. So that was kind of like a no-brainer. There I would have to pay for school or get loans. And so I began working here 16 years ago. And it has been one of the most rewarding experiences, being a social worker, that is. And I worked in that department for 8.5 years, and I think I probably had about 12 positions. I was able to change because we were grant funded. Every day was something different, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I didn't have to change jobs every 5 years because that department gave me the experience that I need. And also I earned my master's degree working in that department, and I became the social work supervisor. I wrote grants, and I was a project coordinator. I was a project director. I supervised social work students. So it gave me the opportunity to do all those things I wanted to do in social work. And I am just so grateful for my teacher in high school, grateful for Miss Dolores, grateful for Margie Cox, Jane Siders. They all believed in, they saw the social worker in me, but I didn't see that in myself. And so, and I left that department and started another job in another department on campus, and that was like my dream job. And I was not only the social worker for that department, but I was the family support coordinator. And I worked again with, children with disabilities, whether it was developmental or physical disabilities, hearing impairments. Absolutely loved that job. And during that time, I had already started working on my doctorate. Why I'm mentioning this is that when you are in your career, you're inspired. Becoming a social worker inspired me to want to be more, not just to myself, but to other people. And I think social workers, that's why we become social workers, because we're giving, we're caring, we're nurturing, we're resourceful. That's why I love social work. I will always be a social worker. I would never, ever, ever, ever let my license lapse. This career choice gave me the opportunity to give my daughter what she needed. Remember, I said I wanted to move away and give her opportunities. I was able to create those opportunities on this campus for my daughter. Like, I created programs with some amazing social workers who believe in the independence of individuals with developmental disabilities, where I did not want to live, eat, sleep, and breathe disabilities. It became just that, and I loved it. And I created the world that Amber was supposed to live in. I created the world that other students, other young adults are enjoying. So it was meant for me to be here. And becoming a social worker made all of that happen. And I was thinking about that this morning. I said, as a social worker, like, not only just paving the way for other social workers, like, I get to work with my students who are now my colleagues and colleagues on campus, but just when I see students on campus that have developmental disabilities, I just think about the work, the hand that I had in that, and not sounding braggadocious, but had it not been for me choosing social work, none of that would have ever happened. And my daughter would have never really experienced what she did to become an amazing human being, an amazing woman. Working in that department, we created programs that created jobs, and Amber had access to all of that. She was able to go to school here. Like, she had access to so much. And where I was wanting to run and get that somewhere else, God allowed it to happen here. So I am so thankful for being a social worker. I'm thankful for those who poured into me. And becoming a social worker, like I say, has been, I say, a dream, and it's giving other people opportunities. And yeah, so that's how I became a social worker. I did not want to get my master's in social work from here because I wanted the experience of being at an HBCU for my graduate experience, but God said otherwise. And so that's my social work story, guys. I have a bachelor's in social work, I have a master's in social work, and I'm licensed on both levels. And I'm currently, again, because I've done my clinical license to become an LCSW, and so I'm starting that journey again to obtain my LCSW, because I want to use that in my health endeavors, not so much as therapy, but my health endeavors as far as some coaching, my nursing. Like, social work was my foundation. It was my foundation, and it has led to me being where I am today, which brings me into working in higher ed. And that will be another video for another time, but I started my career as a social worker on a college campus. at a university, a 4-year institution where most people get their start in social work, with Child Protective Services or doing some type of case management. And though I had experiences with working with Child Protective Services, I still never see myself working for them. However, I keep my license because I never know when I may need a job or have an opportunity to work for them in some capacity. I love social work. It's Social Work Month. I wanted to share my story, and that's it. And I am sticking to it. Social workers rock. I am so happy that I became a social worker.